Hi, Stephen. I know it's great to see you both. It's been ages. Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I think all things considered, I'm I'm here. I've got a roof over my head, food in the fridge. I'm alive. I'm okay. You know? Yeah, yeah. Um, so non-appointment stuff, I would say probably 3 months ago, 2 months ago. Yeah, yeah. I dropped up to my sister's over the holidays, because she's just up in a really an hour and a half away. But because of dialysis, I can't stay more than like half a day at best. And even then, you're doing it with all the precautions and the masks and everything. But going out for dinner with friends, going over to a friend's house, even, um, I haven't done that for about 2 years. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It- well, that's it, and before I started, even as a physician, I rarely saw them. And in my head, you have this image of this massive contraption, that you're strung up to. And it's it's a lot less scary when you're on it, but it is a little bit like a leash, you I am stuck to this chair, and I can't go more than maybe 2 feet this way, 2 feet that way, just to get everything. So I have everything sort of nestled around me, in case I need it. Yeah. Well, so it's been a little bit of a progression. When I was doing dialysis, hemodialysis in the hospital, it started off in a bed, and then they moved me to a chair once I was more comfortable. But they always suggest reclining chairs just in case something does happen and you need to lie down. But it is you're stuck in a chair for 6 hours. So for me, 6 hours. So it's on the machine. So so it I don't necessarily need to do it every day. Like there's a lot of people who won't do it every day, but they have that restriction in fluid and restriction in food. And then in those days that they don't do it, because once, well, a lot of us, once we're on dialysis, our kidneys completely fail, like, and we don't make urine. So any fluid we intake stays with us. And so, over that day you miss it, you're putting on your kilos. And you're collecting that contamination, you're collecting those toxicities, that then need to be filtered out. So on the days, every once in a while, I'll try and skip a day just to see if I can do this and see how I manage it. And I'll put on like a kilo and a half, 2 kilos. So that's what, like 3 to 5 pounds extra in 24 hours. But you feel more tired, you feel bloaty, you feel sluggish. It's you're not right. For me, my joints start aching. I find it much more difficult to go up the stairs or downstairs. I'm very tired, so I'll go to bed early and just sleep a lot, take a nap through the day. It's just no. I know I should have asked for that, eh? Although I think they would probably use it more than I would. Yeah. 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 No, honestly, it was. And that sounds a lot worse. Sounds a lot worse than it actually was. Um, yeah, I know, not even no. So after university, I actually rebelled against the idea of being a doctor. I was just, my dad was really pushing it, and I was so, I was this new graduate from university. I knew everything. I was taking on the world. And so I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor because you wanted me to be a doctor. I was going to go into public relations. And so I did. And it was great. It was a great experience. And I worked for a few organizations for a couple of years. And then I just realized that it wasn't for me. Like I could write and talk and persuade people, journalists, to talk about helping people and write about helping people, or I could actually do it myself. Um, so I did my undergrad at the University of Guelph. So that's about 40 minutes away from here. And then I went to do my postgraduate in public relation at Humber College, which is just sort of in between Mississauga and Toronto. And so it was great until I realized that I just didn't have the passion for it. I'd rather actually help people. Um, and it was such a big decision. I was 23, no, I was 28 at the time, and just realized that the direction that I had always wanted my life to go was was not was not it. It wasn't making me happy. It wasn't fulfilling me. I was miserable in my job, and I just needed to shake things up. And so I decided, why not try medicine? See how it goes. See if I like it. At least I know I like people. I like helping people, and so give it a go. And so I applied to all sorts of places, and then um, one of my roommates from university, from my undergrad, went to Australia, and so I talked to him about it, and he said it was a fantastic opportunity. And so I said, why not? Well, when am I going to get this chance? When am I? He was in medical school there, and then he ended up transferring back here to Canada. Um, and that was going to be the original intention. And then I just liked it. I liked Australia too much. I liked their concept of work-life balance. I liked how medical school was being done, and so it was great. I graduated there and then found my path, my life there. So my mom has cousins down in Melbourne, um, but I think that's it. I think the rest of them are mostly sort of in England, Ireland. Um, yeah. So I was up in Brisbane in the north of Australia, and she lived down in Melbourne. So when I went up to Brisbane, I didn't know anybody. Like there was a whole bunch of Canadians going in the class. It was a class of 300. And I think there were 40 Canadians at the time, or 50. And so we met some of them beforehand, but it was a 2 hour lunch in Toronto, a month before. And so I didn't really know anybody. I didn't have roommates. I had to find my own place. I had to learn the currency and the accent and everything. It was so foreign. And I mean, I remember the first, even though they speak English, you don't understand it. Like it just the accent, especially in Brisbane, can be so thick. And so I remember, like I went to go and get some school supplies on the second day I arrived there, and it was this new currency that I didn't understand, and new places, and I had to take the public transit, and people were talking to me in an accent I didn't understand, using short forms of words I didn't understand, and I was just like, I remember I sat down on the steps in front of this mall where I couldn't figure out how to buy these stupid school supplies, and I called my mom and I was like, I hate it here. I'm coming home. This sucks. This is horrible. And then I was like, no, this is day two of the rest of my life. Like I will have time to figure this out. There was there was no mercy. There was no, there was no mercy. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Where's Carmen? Carmen. Oh, she might be Perth. So Perth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. My parents gave me a little bit of a talk before and said, just make sure you watch what you're saying and don't upset the family. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. So I ended up going into general practice, just because I mean, it was something I was familiar with through my dad and what he did. And it seemed to give me the most chance to talk with people on a personal level, but practical level. You can be a little more real with them, and it gives you a little more freedom to practice how you want, or in the direction that you want. Um, and so I liked it, and I moved down from Brisbane to sort of in between Sydney and Melbourne into a regional town, Albury Wodonga, that straddles the New South Wales Victoria border. And I did my GP training there, and then joined a practice, and it was great. Like I I loved what I did. Um, I sort of mhm. It was, I think it was probably 2000, and like I knew my creatinine, which is a marker of kidney failure or kidney work, um, kidney function. Yeah. So that number was slowly going up over time. And I was like, okay, we can manage this. And with the nephrologist I had in Australia, they were monitoring it on a regular basis. So that was fine. I think the first symptoms I had was about 2015, where I started noticing some swelling. And you get slow swelling in your legs as you can't filter out that fluid as much as your kidneys start failing. And so I noticed that. And then I would slowly get tired. I would just get a little bit more tired over the course of months. And so, I find I'd be going to bed a little bit earlier. I'd struggle to wake up in the mornings. You just sneak that extra cup of coffee throughout the day, or you sneak in a nap when you're done from work before bed. Um, you start declining invitations to go out because you'd rather just rest at home. Things like that. And it was just a slow, gradual process, almost to the point where you don't actually even notice it. You still think you feel normal. You're just making little concessions here, a little concession there, but you're still living your life. And so, even up until I left, I was still working almost regular hours, um, because that concession is so slow. You just integrate it into your schedule. Yeah, well, it was a really difficult decision, and I talked it over with a lot of people, because the option was there, and the nephrologist was really encouraging me to have the transplant in Australia, just with a donor from a friend or something. But my siblings were very, very happy and very, very able to donate. And they were all willing to. They all knew this was coming. We all knew I would need another kidney at some point in time. And so the plan originally was to always get from one of them. See if I could, pilfer one of their organs, after I did it out. Um, and so it was it was easier because there would have been more supports here. We had mom and dad. I could live at home rent free, which is really good. There was support from all the family around here. Plus, Toronto General, where I had my first transplant, they would be doing this transplant. And so they knew me, they knew my history, they knew my records and everything. And so it would have been much easier in that sense. So I came back in 2019. Um, so so originally I started doing some of the work up in 2019. And I was in my head, I was like, we have the donor, the hospital knows me, we have the procedure down, we can do this easy. The donor, so the donor was going to be my brother David initially. Um, and it was going to work out all perfectly. And I had it in my head that it was going to be smooth and simple because the first transplant I had was very smooth and simple. No complications whatsoever. And then I got, yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, they do. And so it's, I mean, it's interesting because you think you're getting a replacement, you think it's going to last forever. But the reality is that it's foreign tissue in your body. And so your body's slowly going to attack it. Your body's slowly going to reject it over time. And so I was on anti-rejections, but even then, like it, you can't completely eliminate your immune system. And if I did, I would be so much more vulnerable, right? Like the common cold, I wouldn't be able to fight off or paper cuts, you know. So it's they have to keep some aspect of the immune system intact, um, and and over time it does wear out. You know, I got 23 years out of this, which was fantastic. You know, I think most living donor kidneys they expect 15 to 20 when I was getting this. So I surprisingly, let me tell you, surprisingly, because I went to university and medical school, but it lasted all that time really well. So I'm grateful. Like I'm really really grateful. But we knew it was going to happen at some point. I had the donor, 100%. Well, exactly, and then suddenly, in the middle of 2019, we found out when I was doing all these pre-workup tests that I developed antibodies to the tissue in my family. So because my mom donated the kidney, my body developed antibodies to her tissue. So none of my siblings then were compatible. They were automatically all eliminated. And so we had to go on the hunt for someone and figure out how to do this. And then the hospital came to us and said they have this donation program where it's like a chain. So my brother would donate into the pool and I could then pull from the pool. And they would create this little chain of he donates to someone and then their person donates to someone else and their person donates to someone else. Eventually I get a kidney. And so they did that and everything was perfect. Everything was great. We were ready. We were supposed to get the transplant in March. And then a week before March of 2020. Yeah. So I'd already been a year here by this point. Um, and a week before, COVID came out and they decided to cancel all non-essential surgeries, which they decided transplants were one of them. So since then, I have been on hold. Yeah. 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 I mean, it's frustrating. It is incredibly frustrating because you've put your life on hold. In the year that I was waiting, I I lost my home. I lost my career. I lost my 10-year relationship. I lost all my friends in Australia. It's it's my body went out of control. I don't have control over my own body anymore. It's all these things that you're missing and you're hoping to get back. You're pinning your hope on this date, on this surgery, which is, medically maybe not as urgent as heart bypasses or other things like that. There are some very urgent surgeries that are out there that people need done. But from a mental point of view, and this is me speaking as a patient, not as a physician, as a patient, it is your entire life that you've now had to put up on the shelf, which is, it's part of your identity. It's part of everything in your being that you are now taking out and putting away. And someone saying, you're not good enough yet to get that back. Like it's hard. Yeah. 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 Um, it's it's difficult because I am of two minds. Like I have the physician hat and I have the patient hat. From a physician hat, I understand it isn't urgent. It's necessary, but there are the supports, like with the dialysis, that can buy you the time. Whereas there are other people in other situations who don't have that time. There are people with really invasive, really detrimental cancers. There are people who need those who need those, coronary bypasses. People with aneurysms that need to be treated urgently. They will definitely take priority because they're at a higher risk of death than I am. And a closer risk of death than I am. And from a physician, sorry, go ahead. Okay, and I was going to say, from a physician point of view, I really understand that. But from a patient point of view, I have my context that I'm sitting with it, and that's 3 years now of my life on hold. I'm seeing everyone I went to medical school with do all these wonderful things and get these fantastic jobs and making real differences. And I'm sitting 6 hours a day in my parents' basement, tied to a couch. Like it's hard to see life passing you by for so long. But yeah, 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 yeah. 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 So, yeah. it's it was interesting. Like it was probably one of the most strangest times of my life, because I'm as a person, I tend to live in the moment. I don't put too much thought in the years ahead. I don't put too much thought in the year behind. I don't usually live with regrets. But it was a really crazy time. So I was on peritoneal dialysis. So that's dialysis through the abdomen um, at the time. And I initially, back in September 2020, I think it was, I developed hypertensive crisis. So my blood pressure, because I think the last ditch effort of my kidney to function just before it really cacked out, um, it shot my blood pressure up to something like 220 on 120. And I woke up one morning with that blood pressure and I had lost partial vision in my left eye. And so I went to the hospital. Over a week and a half, they brought it back down and I came out. But then I developed, I think, a cough. And I was like, okay, whatever. We're in fall. We're getting changing weather. Of course, I'm going to get a cough. That's fine. And I was like, I don't need to see anybody. I'm good. I can work this out. This is great. A week later, 2 weeks later, I was getting a little more breathless. And I was like, yeah, it's okay. I'm fine. My dad, who is actually quite a bastion of common sense, was like, no, go see a doctor. get some antibiotics. And so I did, and I was on antibiotics for 2 weeks and nothing was working. And so I finally got a chest x-ray and the doctor called and said, go straight to hospital. So what had happened is something happened. I was exposed to something. Something was a trigger, but I developed what's called cryptogenic organizing pneumonia. And so my body started attacking my lungs and filling them up with immune system cells, essentially, in fluid. And so over time, think of a bucket slowly filling up. That's what was happening to my lungs. And so anything below that level of water is unusable. And so slowly over the course of weeks, I was losing more and more lung capacity. So by the time I went into hospital, I was going up a flight of stairs of like 12 stairs, and I was having to sit down at the top of the stairs because I was out of breath. And I thought it was a bad pneumonia, and it really wasn't. And so I went into one of our local hospitals, who are amazing, Oakville Hospital, and they tried to figure out what to do, and they couldn't do it over the course of 2 weeks. We tried antibiotics, we tried lung biopsies, we tried bronchial lavages, where they actually put fluid in the lungs and wash it out to try and cultivate something in the fluid, and they couldn't. And so they transferred me to Toronto General, where they did more biopsies and everything. And eventually they just put me on an incredible array of antifungals, antibacterials, antivirals, and high dose steroids to try and calm the lungs down. But by this point I was on high flow oxygen. So getting something like 10 liters per minute, like it just incredible amounts. I couldn't move out of bed. I couldn't speak. And I in my own head was like, oh, okay, whatever. We'll see how this goes. This is fine. I'll be fine. But then because of the pressure of all of that on the lungs, it interfered with the peritoneal dialysis. And so that failed as well. And so I ended up having multi-organ failure at that point, with the lungs failing, the kidneys failing, and my heart enlarging because of all that fluid pressure. And so that's when they took me off peritoneal and put me on hemo, and ended up taking, I think, 16 liters out of fluid. Yeah, it was insane. But I remember, like, at one point, and this was I think New Year's 2020, 2021. Yeah. So that it was actually like New Year's Eve. I was sitting in a hospital bed tripoding, and so that's where you sort of brace yourself to try and stabilize the lungs so you can get more air in. And I was sure, like I was at that point where I was breathing something like 40, 50 times a minute, and I was sure I wasn't going to see the morning. And I was like, well, I've had 23 extra years. Like, that's pretty good. Thank goodness it didn't happen. Like, I survived. But it's the closest I've ever been to death. And it's terrifying. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it's it's kind of weird. It's the I've had years, I've had years coming to terms with it. So it's, I wasn't sure if I was going to survive the first surgery. Like, kidney transplants are massive, and there's lots of room for things to go wrong. And so with the first surgery, there was a lot of internal processing, a lot of self-reflection. Um, and with this second one, I sort of came to terms with it. Like I I think somewhere around a week before Christmas, around Christmas time, I realized how bad it actually was. And there are two ways I can look at this. I can either stomp my feet, be furious, throw a tanty, and just be miserable, or I can accept the fact that I've had 23 great years on borrowed time. And if it's my time, it's my time. Like, you know? Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that you just do naturally. It's I think it's almost like your body's reaction. Like at that point, there wasn't actually much I could do to help myself. Everything was reliant on the medical expertise of the hospital. And by being a physician, I knew like my choices are I get through this without going into ICU and being on a ventilator, or I go on a ventilator. And if I'm on a ventilator, you know, half the people on ventilators don't make it off. Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, yeah. So I'm a general practitioner, so a family physician. Um, but I've sort of niched myself a little bit more. Initially, it was in mental health, just because I find it fascinating, and I think it can be done very poorly in family practice, or it can be done very well. And I like it. It's interesting for me. And then I moved into vet vet affairs. So military veterans would come home, and I'd work a lot with them and their PTSD, and try and get them reintegrated into society through work, education, retraining, and helping with a lot of their physical stuff to help them cope. Um, and it was really interesting. And then oddly, from there, I noticed a few were coming in and were questioning about their identity, their gender. Um, and it really became sort of an interest of mine. And so I've niched myself more into sexual health, HIV, hepatitis, and transgender medicine. Yeah. And I mean, it's a relatively new field, but I found it such a vitally important field because it's a sector of the population that are so marginalized and can be so traumatized, and even within the medical and so misunderstood, and it's even within the medical profession there can be such an ignorance to what they're going through. um, and because I was in a regional area, there was no one who was doing that. There was no one who these patients, these people could access for support. Um, so it sort of became the focus of what I was doing there. Yeah. 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 It's there are times I get angry. There are there are times I get frustrated. I thank goodness, I don't know very many people who are unvaccinated. Most of the people I know, almost everyone, I would say 99% of the people I know are vaccinated and understand why it's important to get vaccinated and understand the importance of science and understand the trust that we need to put in science. I was absolutely. So because I'm immunocompromised, I am actually triple vaccinated. So I have the two plus the booster, and Ontario has just approved a second booster for the immunocompromised. So I might get that. But it's it was really difficult. It's difficult because it's it's not just me. There are other people who need those spaces in hospital, who need those beds in ICU. And I remember being in the hospital and watching the anti-vaxxer protests in front of the hospital. And, it just boggles my mind. And I don't think it's attention seeking. And I think they are very concerned. And yes, they are very concerned. And that's fine. I will never, doubt their level of anxiety around the vaccine. But at the same time, you can't tell me that you're going to deny science in one aspect, but then use the applications of science in every other aspect of your life. Like, to me, if you don't see that hypocrisy, then maybe you're just not thinking through the issue properly, and I part of this also, and I do have to say this, and this might not be a great opinion, but I've talked this over with a lot of doctors as well, and nurses and other healthcare professionals, is that science also hasn't always been necessarily upfront. There have been some reasons in the past for people to doubt the truthfulness of science. We see the whole opioid crisis and how that came about, and now the realization of the massive marketing behind that. We see uh, this CEO of this HIV medicine who's now being jailed, and like it's just it's there's no wonder that people don't trust science. But at the same time, this is a public health issue. We have seen, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, brothers, sisters, children die from this. I don't think there is anybody who doesn't know someone who is unaffected by COVID and has a loss in some way of their life. Like, if that's not reason enough to be community minded, then I don't know what is. And it gets me really frustrated. Um, and not just for me, for everybody who's stuck in positions like I am, where we're just waiting, because someone. Sorry, go ahead. I did. I did. Oh, I did. No, no, I don't think so. I think it I think it just worked however it was. So like flu vax is what I get. I never get a reaction, but these COVID vaccines, the first time I got a little bit of a sore arm, and it was like man flu for me. I was in bed and crying and blah, blah, and then the second one, I was like, oh, this is not man flu. This is like proper flu. And I was in bed for a day, and then the booster I got, um, it took me out for 2 days, good and proper for 2 days. Like I was, yeah. So I'm a little concerned how this second booster is going to go, but you know what? Ah, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'll be just taken care of. It's going to be, yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I watched that as well, and I I kind of agree with him. He reflected and said it had to do with social media. And I think we're in an age where so much information is so readily available that so much information is so readily available, but none of it is vetted. You know, like no one verifies what is put up. And so everyone becomes their own opinion expert, which turns into information expert. Um, so so it becomes really difficult to know where to get these sources um, that will give you the correct information. But it's also, I think, because all this information is out there and all these different opinions are out there, people will naturally go towards the information that confirms their own belief, right? Um, and I think that makes it really difficult. You know, once you developed your fixed beliefs in your own head, you're going to seek out the information that seeks to prove that and to reinforce that. And nothing is going to change that. You know, I read an article recently that you won't change an anti-vaxxer's mind or someone with a fixed belief of anything with facts, because facts are irrelevant. Once they develop that fixed belief, it becomes almost an emotional thing. You know, if they're wrong, then it becomes a personal attack. And I feel that's what this political debate in vaccination versus not vaccination has become. It's become people feeling personally attacked. Um, yeah, yeah, and it's really, really difficult to change. And people will, and once you hang on to that belief for so long, even if you recognize on some level that it's wrong, you can't change it because you've been sticking with it for so long. And it develops these cycles. And it's unfortunate that now we're seeing the only way these cycles are broken is if they end up in ICU and regretting that they never got the vaccination because they're on death's door. Like it even then some of them don't. Yeah. No. Mhm. Oh my gosh. Mhm. Yeah. 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 Okay. So the role of the kidney is to filter out your blood. Um, and so in doing that, it produces urine. And so it takes out, you know, toxins, and you can take out some of the drugs that are in your body and extra fluid and this and that. And then it comes out as urine. Because mine are dead, this is what this machine does. And so I have a port. Ooh, sorry, my blood. It's okay. It's just my blood pressure. Yeah, yeah. Everything's good. So I have a port. I don't know if you can see it. I'll see if I can tilt it down. So that goes actually into my chest. Um, uh, and so blood will come out of that, go into. So this is permanent in my chest, but I'll get to the procedure because I've got the procedure as well. So they initially put this in, and it just stays with me. And because it's in there, and because it's an open hole into my body. It really restricts me from doing things like no swimming, no showers. I have to change this once a week. I have to be very careful with how this is, because if this gets contaminated, I get a blood infection through the entire body. And that's it. Yeah. Yeah. No, because it's generally covered in underclothes and stuff. But because of the lung issue, I stay further away from people because we don't know what brought that up. We don't know what's going to cause it again. But this will filter out everything, and so it has like it has. Ooh, let's see if I can change. So it has a dialyzer there, which actually filters the blood, um, and then it goes back into my body. And at the same time, it'll pull out fluid, any excess fluid that I have, and so I can set settings of how much fluid I want to put and how long I'm on this. But it's yeah. Well, and that's where the problem lies. And so I have to really like I have the prescription of what is ideal from my nephrologist, and he's wonderful. Um, but it really also depends on how much fluid I take in and what I eat and how much salt is in the diet, and it's awful, but it's sometimes if I can take out too much and then you realize, your blood pressure drops and you start getting dizzy and then you need to unhook or you need to put more back in. But if you don't take out enough, then you slowly start building up, and it's like your bucket slowly starts filling up, and you start swelling, and you find it much more difficult to breathe. I find my vision in this eye changes when I get too much or too little because of of, of the issue from the hypertensive crisis. Um, yeah, so it affects the optic nerve itself. I find like so it's the cupping of the yeah where the optic nerve enters the eye and causes issues. Yeah, but it's great. It works really really well, um, but it's it's onerous. It's a massive machine that is very particular as well. So sometimes it won't like the position I'm in. Like a lot of people can do this overnight, but I can't because it doesn't like the position I'm in, and so alarms will go off. And so the only functional time I can do this is when I'm awake. Um, and so it's yeah, yeah. No, in fact, I think that's probably a little bit rougher, and that's why I don't do it every other day, because if you think about it, like if your kidneys don't work, you're not making any urine, you're not getting rid of any of that fluid. And so your body weight is going up, you know, 3 kilos, down 3 kilos, up 3 kilos, down 3 kilos, every other day, which is a lot for your organs to actually take. That puts a lot of pressure on your organs because your blood pressure then goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Um, but on top of that, this also pulls out a lot of protein. It pulls out a lot of everything. And so you're going from say a salt level like this and a protein level like this and a water level like this over 3 hours, it drops down to here. And so that's a lot for your body to take. Your body doesn't normally handle that. At my worst, it was like going from being 6 months pregnant in the amount of weight and and dysfunction. And then that drops down over the course of 3 hours. How do you negotiate that? It's really, it doesn't number your body. I I I do, but fortunately, that's why I start in the afternoon and then end up at about 7 o'clock at night. So I can have dinner and then go to bed after that. It's not too bad. But I do know, if I borderline on the taking off a little bit too much, it's it's difficult. Like I'm winded. I find it difficult to go upstairs. I just you don't feel great until your fluid shifts around again a little bit. Mhm. Honestly, it's been amazing in that respect. I haven't had to put out a single cent. Um, so they've paid for the hospital provided machine, and they provide all the supplies. All the medications I take in relation to this is supplied by the government for free. Um, it's just, if I wasn't in Canada, I wouldn't. I'd be out of pocket. So they have a national healthcare bare bones system, but I would have had private health insurance, and so I would have been out of pocket. But not significantly by any stretch of the imagination. If this was all private, if this was in the States, you know, I don't even know if we would have been able to do this. You know, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's it's interesting. Like I don't know. I think over the years, over the past 23 years, since I got my first transplant in 1999, I've questioned medicine and religion, and the intersection of both. It's my faith. I think my faith in medicine has shifted slightly. Um, you know, I was a big believer in the goodness of medicine, in the altruism of medicine. And from being a physician and being a patient, you realize there are altruistic people in medicine, but the industry of medicine is not necessarily altruistic. There are people there to make profits. There are people there to cut budgets. There are people there to ensure the books are balanced at the cost of sometimes patients, sometimes staff, and these are the realities that we live in. This is the reality of a developed country. There are other priorities for government budgets, and sometimes healthcare or public health are sacrificed for that. And that's a reality. And doctors are people too. They're confined within their budgets. They're confined within their management structures. Same with nurses. Same with all the hospital staff. And so sometimes their hands are actually tied. Um, Also, the impact of public opinion on healthcare is has really dawned on me, and that's become very, very noticeable with this COVID pandemic. The How am I going to say this? The value of public opinion and the voting population to change the course of public health initiatives has been really apparent, I think, over this pandemic. With regards to my faith in religion and spirituality, I don't know. Am I still spiritual? Yes, absolutely. Um, in the same way that I was? No, I would say not. I I don't think I'm blindly Catholic, but I definitely would say I'm blessed, even given my circumstances right now. I have a roof over my head. There's food in the fridge. I have a supportive family and community. I have access to medical care. There are lots of people who don't. And I don't know why I deserve this, why I got this, but I'm grateful that I do. Um, Yeah. Um, I I mean, I think we all have those why me questions, right? We all, if anytime you face a crisis, you say why me, and you have that introspection. I think for me, that led me to realize, or actually just to modify my perspective instead, and to think about, instead of focusing on the why me, I focus on how do I use this to my advantage. If one of my friends was really, really good. She's wonderful. I went to a Let me tell you, most of my family doesn't understand this either. But like, it's, it's one of my friends was, we had lots of conversations because she was around during my first transplant, and she's been around during this, and she's like, there are people who things happen to. There are bad things that happen to people all the time in the world, and there are people who, in their circumstances, can be victims, or there are people who can be fighters. Um, and I just decided not to be a victim. Like, I won't be victimized by this. I'm not going to let kidney disease, kidney failure, or being a dialysis patient define me. It sucks. It's temporary, but I'm more than this. And that's how I've chosen to frame everything. And I think moving on that perspective, you see the little benefits that you have in your life. Because it's easy to be overwhelmed by this. This can be all consuming. And if I choose not to be consumed by it, I guess, that's my survival mechanism. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. it's, it's, it would be a lie to say that it hasn't been detrimental to the family. It's been a struggle for all of them. Dad, because he's a physician, he knows the outcome of this. He knows the risks. He takes it. He's pretty serious about this. My siblings have been wonderful. They've been really, really good. Now that my sister Elizabeth is actually going to donate the kidney, they found a match for her in this chain. Um, it's it, David was good. The chain. So he was initially for the March to 2021. Um, and then he wasn't compatible for any further chains, and so they decided to test other siblings. And my sister was compatible, and they found a chain for her. And so they've just been trying to use her. Also, because now my brother's in Kenya, working with the Foreign Service, it's so much easier for my sister, who's just in Ottawa, to do it. So yeah. Um, but I mean, we've had complications, and they've managed the complications as well as they can. Um, Sometimes I think they're probably a little more stressed out than I am. But it's wonderful. Like we've had many issues though. We've had to replace this central line 4 times, because it's blocked. So my body, because everything happens like this, it's crappy with the kidneys, but fantastic at clotting up things. So so it'll just clot this up, and so every few months now I have to get this taken out and put in. And because of that, now they've put in fistulas. So, ooh, what's that? So you can see a little scar there. So that was the first one, which, because it's my body, failed miserably. So they've now got a second one up here, which is going well. And so they're going to be switching to that if this transplant doesn't eventuate. But yeah, so this has been going 9 weeks now to heal. So it's, I mean, it's a process. It's frustrating. because with each new surgery there's new restrictions on what you can or can't do, and all the while I'm trying to exercise and trying to stay healthy, but my well it's pretty routinized now. We were very lucky. One of our friends gave us a treadmill, because in the midst of the COVIDness, yeah, I don't want to be going out and mingling among people. And so I'm on the treadmill for an hour to an hour and a half every morning, and then do a little bit of study, and then hook myself up to this. And I'm on this for 7 hours. Um, so because I'm not working, if I wasn't doing something, I'd go stir crazy. And so I decided to do a master's. And then partway through that, I decided to do another master's. So I'm doing two masters, one in sexual health. These are the silver linings. These are the things that keep me occupied, keep my brain occupied, and keep my skills up. And so yeah, one's in sexual health medicine, and the other is in health management and leadership. Um, so it's because one of the things I really actually am struggling with is, do I go back into general practice when I'm done this? With COVID and even the regular coughs, colds, and flus, and me being immunosuppressed, it's almost like a death sentence going back there. And so I'm going to have to find something else. So I either go into sort of management and health leadership, or maybe policy or sexual health medicine or something. So yeah. I do. I have my water bottle here, but I'm very careful with how much I drink on this. Yeah. 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 So, um, nothing was happening over the holidays because the hospital closed down over Christmas and they're on a minimal staff. And so early in the new year, I emailed my coordinator, who's my contact, for the transplant team, and said, "What's going on? Do we have anything showing up?" And he said, "Your case is being considered. Would you be willing to go, or would you be ready to go in the next 7 to 14 days?" And so I said, "Yes, absolutely. I'm ready. I'm healthy. I'm going to restrict myself, or I'm going to go into lockdown and not see anybody so I can't contract any diseases. I'm going to be fantastic." And then a week and a half later, he said, "By the way, we have no operating spaces in January. So we'll just have to see how we go." So once again, it's been the story of sort of run, catch up. Oh no, we're not doing it. Let's hold off. Um, so it's I sort of modified my expectations ages ago to not actually convince myself it's going to happen until I'm in the hospital getting it done. And that way, you save the disappointment, and you save the disappointment for the family, because you hear this information and everyone gets excited. Everyone thinks the possibility is there and it's going to happen, and then you're let down again. And they warned us this would happen. They warned us there'd be lots of false starts, but it's still the waiting game. But we're determined that it's going to happen in February at some point. They're going to get the spot available for theater, and hopefully the spots in ICU will be there available, and then I'll be able to go. Yeah. Yeah. I would love to do that. That'd be awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good. I'd like it. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an awesome question because we're also focused on the here and now, but all this has financial implications and policy implications for future. It's I don't even want to think of how much I've cost the medical system in Ontario over the past 2 years, between my 12-week hospital stay from last because of the pneumonia, and then this. I am well truly into probably the millions of dollars at this point. Um, yeah, it's fairly common. I mean, with the ICU stays and all of that, like that's all expensive, but that money has to come from somewhere, right? And so the concern, I guess, is A, are they going to be calling back on other areas of healthcare, which are equally as important, preventative healthcare, rehabilitation, things like that? Or are they actually going to be calling from other services, and government line items like education, like social services, like senior support services, where at some point we're going to have to pay this bill. And where is that going to come in? And then on top of that, because it's been such a strain on the healthcare system, we've seen a mass flocking of people leaving the healthcare system. How are we going to rebuild this industry? How are we going to get people massively? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like people are not only getting sick, but they're burnt out. Um, and because there isn't that support for them, there aren't those networks. People don't trust the industry anymore, as something to work in. So it's just creating this vicious circle where I think healthcare is just going to go down and down and down. It's going to cost more, and it's going to be less supported, um, unless unless we can really turn it around somehow. But I don't know. I just don't know. Like that's way above my pay grade. Yeah, 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 definitely. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm. I'm in good spirits. I'm in good spirits, which is, I like it. It keeps me going. But thank you so much. Thank you for this, guy. uh, thank you, thank you. Absolutely. Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah.